Greetings. Today I would like to show you one of my recent games. I played black and my opponent played the London system. He played d4 and I played g6. Um, in this case, white usually play e4. However, if you want to play the London system, you need to set the pawns on e3 and c3, and this is what my opponent does. I play bishop g7 and he plays bishop d3, another mistake. However, this is typical position for the London system for white, and at least typical moves for white. However, I don't follow the London system, so the best maybe was to play d5 or c5. However, I played d6 and play my typical Indian scheme with knight c6 and further e5 and f5. He plays h3. I don't know the reason for this move. Probably he was afraid that after knight f3 I play bishop g4 and exchange the knight, exchange the bishop to the knight. I played knight c6, he played c3, and now I play e5. So far we don't play good move according to the engine. However, so he chose to play London scheme and I chose to play Indian scheme. So in my opinion, Indian scheme is the best way to play against the London system, just because white are not ready for that, and the London scheme is not good for that, because so right now, for instance, after I play e5, he cannot move d5, because in this case he also need to move the other pawns forward, and he already wastes time to move e3 c3, and now he needs to move e4 c4. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want to take the pawn, because in this case he will break the main idea, the wall of 3 pawns, and the main idea is that the pawn d4 should stand. Therefore, I like that my position is my opponent is confused, and we don't even interact. Just develop. He developed his way, I develop my way. So he chose to play knight e2, and I play f5. He played bishop b5. Finally, he started thinking about interaction with black. So I protect the knight. So he pinned the knight and I protected. He castle knight f6, and right now my opponent understands that I develop all pieces, and he still need to develop the bishop and knight, and also think about the rook in the corner. And he doesn't have space for that, so he needs to move the pawn c4, for instance, like the engine suggests, but he chooses to occupy the space by f4. And this is a mistake, because actually if we exchange pawns on e5, he will not win anything, because so after queen e7, so if he exchange all pawns on e5, he will still have a weak pawn e3, and I will be able to attack it. So he plays king h2. He probably wants to try to put pressure on me to play in g4 and attack my king side. However, I play a6 and bishop a4. I see that the queen side of of my white opponent is not developed, so I decided to castle there. And right now the engine suggests to play d5, and I understand this idea, because in this case he will be able to attack my queen side, but he still wants to keep his triple pawn e3 d4 c3, following the London system. So he plays b4, and now I realize that if I exchange the pawns, so I exchange the pawns, I can attack the knight. Knight on e2, and knight has no good place to move. The knight cannot move to g3, or otherwise it should be g1, f3, and still not a good position further. So he needs to protect it, and the best way is to protect rook f2, but in that case I would play knight e4, and he needs to return the rook back. So he decided to protect the knight with rook e1, but this is a big mistake. The idea is of the protection the knight is to protect it, but he actually pins the knight himself. Pins the knight and rook. So right now he cannot move the knight because I'll take the rook, and he cannot move the rook because I take the knight. So no, for instance, if he moves to g3, so I'll just take the rook on e1. So he needs to move his bishop to d2 to protect the rook right now. However, as engine suggests, engines see that, and I also saw that in the game. So my bishop can attack the diagonal. My bishop g7 can attack the diagonal a1, h8, and after sacrificing the pawns, I can check and win the rook some way. So the question how to do it. The engine suggests to take the pawn, but in this case it will be bishop can take, rook take, and then right now if the knight takes the knight, so I'll win the rook for the knight. If he take with a pawn, okay, if he take with a queen, of course in this case I simply by the check I win the queen. So he moves here and I take the queen, so I will have the queen for the bishop. Or if he takes the knight, so it will be queen for bishop and the knight. So it's not good for white. So the rest is to take the knight with a pawn, but in this case it will be check again. And if he takes, I check, he moves, and I attack the king, and I take the pawn and attack the king and the rook. And if he takes with the queen, so I win the rook, and after that I win the knight and maybe even the bishop. So this position would be not good for black. And he cannot take with the knight because in this case I win the rook, and then further I win the queen. So this is what the engine suggests. However, I played differently. I played knight g4, which is actually also beautiful, brilliant move according to the engine. He has no chance to escape, because if he moved to g3, I'll checkmate him this interesting way. Checkmate. So he cannot move to h1 because I win the queen. He cannot. Okay, if he moves to g1, I'll sacrifice the pawn or the knight for the pawn, and okay, he needs to take. I take. If he takes the pawn, so I will play rook h4, and so the position will be the same when he actually loses the game, after he loses the rook and the knight. So the best way was to take the knight, and then I check as well. He moves back, and now I take the pawn. It's a second brilliant move in the game. and second sacrifice of the knight. So I sacrifice 2 knights for the one for nothing, one for the pawn. Actually, one for the check and one for the pawn. He chose to play g3. So in this case, actually, the best would be to play bishop takes the bishop. So exchange bishops, then interesting move knight g3. And actually can take the rook and then win the rook in the corner. And I'm not afraid of these checks because I still win the rook, and my position is superior here. Yeah, I have advantage. A rook for the knight. The engine suggests even better move, so check, he takes, I take, he moves, and exchange rocks here. After exchange rocks, the position of white becomes interesting because on one side the king is very vulnerable, on the other side white still have a knight for the advantage. However, the only developing move is b2, and in this case, checking the king, I can win the position. Yeah, I can take the pawn, or I can move the queen to h2, and checking further, I can check, he moves, check, he moves, I take the pawn, and he only has a chance to protect the diagonal, and I win the game. So I return back, and now we so return to the variation which happens in the game. So I sacrifice the knight, and he didn't take my bishop. He played g3, and this is not very good move because in this case I win immediately. So he moved king f2, I queen h2, he takes the knight, and I checkmate him. It's a beautiful checkmate. It was better to play after the check. It was better to play f1, but just for one move I check him. He needs to move the king, and I check again, and the position is the same. So if he move, I checkmate. However, if he move back to f1, I have very interesting. I sacrifice the rook as well. And after exchange the bishops, it turns out that white cannot take the rook because it will be a checkmate. So this is a combination. So let me show the combination, the entire combination which I actually played. So it starts from this position. So I just take the pawn, and my opponent doesn't see, actually maybe I didn't see the entire combination at that moment, but combination starts from here. Then I attack the knight, and he protects the knight with a rook, which is a big on e1, which is a big mistake. And then I play knight g4, take, check. He moved to g1, then I sacrifice the knight, and then he played g3. I check, he moved to f2, I check him again, and okay, and as I say, if he moved to f1, I would sacrifice the rook for the knight, and after that checkmate him anyway. And actually he chose to take the knight and get a checkmate on f3 by the pawn. It's a very beautiful checkmate, and I hope you like this combination. I hope you like my video and my explanations. See you next time. Bye bye.